Preface to the 1952 edition. On 16th March 1918, a few months after the publication of Christ, the Life of the Soul, a work destined to have so great a success, Columba Marmion mentioned to one of his correspondents that the ensemble of his works would comprise 4 volumes: Christ, Our Life, The Mysteries of Christ, Benedictine Asceticism, and Sacerdotes Alter Christus. On 25th September of the same year, he wrote, "I have begun the 4th volume for priests. Here is the plan. 1. The eternal priesthood. 2. The priestly vocation. 3. The Mass. 4. The sacrifice of praise. 5. The sacrifice of thanksgiving. 6. Propitiation. 7. Impetration." Christ and His Mysteries appeared in 1919, and shortly after the publication, September 1922, of Christ, the Ideal of the Monk, on 30th January 1923, the abbot of Maridsu was called to God. The celebrated trilogy was left without its crown, that part of his message, second in importance only to Christ, the Life of the Soul, which Columba Marmion had intended for priests. Pendent opera interrupta. This interruption was to be prolonged over many years. Why? As the person solely responsible, the writer of this preface owes his readers an explanation. As is generally known, Columba Marmion wrote nothing himself for publication. The first 3 volumes, treating of Christ, were edited by one of his monks, with the help of notes taken at the abbot's conferences by his disciples. From this mass of documents, the editor succeeded in extracting a systematic exposition of doctrine and of asceticism. This delicate task was accomplished with the encouragement of Columba Marmion. There is not a single page which was not submitted to him, not a page which was not revised by him, pen in hand, making a correction here and there, and adding an occasional text from the Scriptures, the Fathers, or the liturgy, to illustrate his thought. This constant and exhaustive revision not only served to guarantee the editor against all danger of error, but enabled Columba Marmion to give his work the hallmark of absolute authenticity. After his death, numerous notes written in his own hand on the priesthood and on the sanctity of the priest were found among his papers. They were the notes he had used in the preparation of his conferences. From this material, collected over a period of 30 years, it would have been possible to develop a systematic, homogeneous treatise. Unhappily, it would not be possible to submit this work to the control of the true author. There could be no revision, no approval to guarantee its value. From this fact, as can easily be understood, there arose in the mind of the editor a scruple which gradually became insurmountable until recently paralyzed every attempt to carry out the work. It was only quite recently that the opportunity presented itself to undertake the task under conditions more favorable than could have been hoped for. Dom Rylant, who had been a disciple of Columba Marmion from an early date, had attended his conferences for many years, was freed from other important and engrossing duties. With that generosity is well known to our readers, he has given us the invaluable help of his profound knowledge of the teaching of Columba Marmion. His constant and learned collaboration has enabled us to present the public a synthesis of sacerdotal doctrine worthy of our common master. It may be of interest to give some details about the ministry which Dom Marmion exercised among the clergy. He was particularly fond of this branch of the apostolate because it was addressed to the friends of Jesus who had been associated by the divine master with himself in his work of redemption. He often used to say when speaking of these conferences that they were relayed by loudspeakers. He had been well prepared by Providence for this noble task. Dom Marmion had an intimate knowledge of seminary life, both in Dublin and in the college in Rome, where he completed his theological formation. Coming back to Ireland after his ordination in the Eternal City in 1881, he was appointed curate in Dundrum on the outskirts of Dublin. During 1 year, he served there his initiation to the manifold activities of the parochial ministry. His archbishop then appointed him to the chair of philosophy in the seminary of Clonliffe. He occupied it for 4 years, in the course of which many aspirants to the priesthood came to submit themselves to his direction. At the same time, he had charge of 2 communities of nuns and provided for the spiritual needs of the prisoners, men and women, in the prisons of Dublin. Through this prolonged intercourse with different types of souls, the most abandoned as well as the most noble, Father Marmion familiarized himself gradually with the innermost depths of the human conscience. He was 28 years old when, already rich in priestly experience, he was able in 1886 to realize his aspirations to the cloister and enter Meredith. After his religious profession, he came in touch with the parishes in the neighborhood of the abbey, and on account of his ardent zeal, was in great demand among the parish priests, who saw him a born preacher, whose turn of phrase, sometimes imperfect but always original, moved the souls of his hearers. His fame spread little by little. Soon he inaugurated at Dinant-sur-Meuse his real apostolate among priests by a series of monthly recollections to the clergy of the town. This series lasted over 2 years, 1897 through 1898. But it was in Louvain, whither he was sent in 1899, and where he remained 10 years, that this ministry was to find its full development in the Collège du Saint-Esprit, which comprises professors of the faculties of theology and young priests studying for degrees, as well as in the seminary Léon 23rd and the American Seminary. He gave forth his doctrine in the course of many retreats and series of conferences. A new voice was heard in this university milieu. The dogmatic character of his preaching and the profound conviction and vitality which inspired it made a vivid impression. Dom Marmion rapidly won the respect of these priests, many of whom chose him as their director. The most illustrious of these was Monsignor Mercier. When he later became archbishop and then cardinal, Mercier entrusted to Dom Marmion the spiritual conferences for 80 priests of the parishes and colleges of Brussels, 1907 through 1908. But already England had made her claim on him. Cardinal Byrne, Archbishop of Westminster, and Monsignor Amigo, Bishop of Southwark, frequently invoked his zeal on behalf of their clergy. This apostolate, which was especially fruitful during these years, continued until his death. The seminaries of Tournai and Nottingham, August and September 1922, were the last to profit by this teaching, which was at the same time so supernatural and so human.